Thank you for having me today. It's a hectic semester for everybody, I know, so thank you for taking time out and coming here. What I'll be doing today is talking about one aspect of the work we do at Health Sciences with regard to with regard to trying to get people to be more active in their overall day-to-day life. One of the things we do is try to focus on the workplace and try to give them opportunities to be active while people are working. So we use treadmill workstations and sit-to-stand workstations to get people to break sedentary behavior during the 8-hour workday. So the nature of our occupations have changed drastically over the years. So we have transitioned from being very active hunter-gatherers, agriculturalists, to being more sedentary, sitting for about 8 hours per day continuously for most of us at work. And there was a study that recently came out that actually compared the differences in bone density across different time spans, and you can see as we become more sedentary, the density in our bones has decreased drastically over the course of time. So with hunter-gatherers and agriculturalists, there's a lot more bone loading while you're standing, walking around, doing stuff, which tends to affect and maintain bone density. But as you transition to become more sedentary, you can see there's a significant decrease in the density of the bone. The only hunting and gathering I do is when I'm at Whole Foods pushing a grocery cart. So right off the bat, I'd like to make a distinction between the physical activity that we used to engage in previously, which was much more intense, which is more common to the exercise that we engage in. Exercise is more purposeful activity. Like if you want to increase your aerobic capacity, you need to go out and run for about 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. That's exercise for you. Movement, on the other hand, is becoming more popular. So we are all sitting right now, but the proposition is that if we are able to accumulate more movement over the course of the day, then it's beneficial for you. So for an example here is incidental physical activity. This is Ruggles here. You can see that there are folks who are using the stairs and there are folks who are using the escalator. And the folks who are choosing to use the stairs are engaging in more incidental physical activity. So they are contracting their muscles more during the course of the day as compared to those using the escalators. They're more sedentary. It's a sedentary mode of transport there. I'm sure a lot of you folks have seen images like this. There's a great push to suggest that sitting is becoming more hazardous for health. It's a little drastic, these pictures here. They're equating it to smoking of our generation. There you can see the Grim Reaper standing behind a chair over there. But these are different ways to try and get the message across that sitting may be harmful for you. This is an example that I like to use to put things into perspective about how occupational physical activity tends to affect a health variable. So most people know that there's a problem of obesity in our society today. At least 60% of the population is either overweight or obese. And this is a graph from a study that was done way back in 1956, which looked at weight status based on occupational physical activity in an industrial male population in India. On the x-axis here, you have different categories of physical activity levels based on occupation. So there's sedentary over here, there's light work, and going all the way up to very heavy work. And you can see those engaging in sedentary occupations are stallholders, people who sell stuff, or shopkeepers and supervisors and clerks in the first grade there. And the folks engaging in very heavy work are the folks who do manual labor. So the cutters, the carriers, the blacksmiths. I had no idea what an ashman was. I had to look at Google to see what it was. It's equivalent to garbage collectors these days. And on the y-axis you have weight status. So you can see that there is a nice trend over here. As you engage in more active occupations, you can see the decreasing trend in weight. And what's really interesting in this graph to me is that those engaging in light work have a similar weight status as compared to those engaging in heavy work. So this has been, pardon me?
Heavy workers have more muscles.
Yes, good. They have more caloric intake too. Good. Nobody really points that out, but me shut it. That's really good. So this concept of trying to get people to be more active at work is gathering a lot of traction these days. The CDC, in fact, has labeled the workplace as a priority setting for health promotion. It's because it's a natural social network where people interact with each other and can actually influence each other's behavior and try to promote physical activity. A lot of workplace health programs have also shown to increase work productivity. It's shown to decrease health insurance premiums, decrease compensation claims, and even absenteeism. So the kind of work that we do at Health Sciences is fits nicely into the National Institute of Occupational Safety Health's program or initiative. It's called the Total Worker Health Initiative, and they have the program which is called Prevention Through Design, which aims to retrofit workplaces with equipment that can prevent illnesses. There are different kind of workstations that have become popular. Some that involve dynamic movement. So when I talk about dynamic movement, it's about actual contraction of muscles, and there's more blood flow. So walking, for example, is dynamic movement, as compared to static physical activity where you're just standing and your muscles are just contracting isometrically. So there's a distinction between that. There are different modes of trying to get people to engage in dynamic movement. This is the one that we've experimented with, treadmill workstations. People have tried using little bicycle kind of equipment under the desk. This is an elliptical equivalent that can be used while you're walking. Some innovative folks have even tried using the hamster wheel. I wouldn't recommend this, that we use this at home or anywhere else. So talk about two studies that we've done to show proof of concept that these may be useful for improving health outcomes. The first study was what we did with treadmill workstations. This was done while I was a doctoral student. This was my dissertation. We did this way back in 2009. This was the first study that was published that showed beneficial effects of using treadmill workstations on health outcomes. So when we started doing this study, this was a very new concept, so we really didn't know how to go about, doing this. So all we really wanted to do was to provide office workers with a treadmill workstation and see if they actually use it and see if there are any beneficial effects to that. So we wanted to see if they, if I provide X number of people with this workstation, will it help to reduce their sitting time and increase their physical activity? And would that be sufficient to impact some distal outcome variables like body composition and those markers that we look in the blood like cholesterol and blood glucose and those kind of things. And we particularly chose overweight and obese workers for this because they are more sensitive to change to such light intensity interventions. Studies like this are pretty hard to do and expensive because there's a lot of equipment required. So we had a small budget to do this. We recruited about 12 university administrative staff and faculty. This was a 9-month pre-post study design. And to be eligible for this study, you primarily had to have a body index of more than 28 kg per meter square. So you're either overweight or obese, and you had no contraindications to walking continuously for about 60 minutes. Our main outcome variable was to see change in behavior. So we wanted to see if providing users with these workstations would actually decrease sedentary behavior and increase their standing and stepping time. We measured physical activity using a sensor, a thigh bone sensor, which detects the position of the thigh, and it can discriminate between physical activity, sitting, and standing. And this is the output that we get from the sensor. And we use this to show participants how much they were sitting, standing, and try to motivate them to be more active. So you can see over here, this is a person at 10 a.m. over here. You can see the person standing a lot more than they're walking. They tend to walk more in the afternoon. Our distal outcome variables were anthropometric variables. We measured weight, we measured waist and hip circumferences. Those are related to cardiovascular and metabolic health. We measured body composition, person body fat, lean fat, lean density mass, and to see if there was any change in bone density. We did blood draws. We looked at the levels of lipids and glucose within in the blood and see if it changed due to using the treadmill workstations. We measured dietary intake as well, because diet influences your body composition. It's another variable. It's physical activity and diet which influences weight. So as you can see, our participants were pretty heavy set. On average, they were about 195 to 100 kg, so it's about 220 pounds when they started off. And we measured our outcome variables at 3 time points: at baseline, 3 months into the study, and then at the end of the study, which was 9 months. And this, the first bar graph here shows the total time spent sitting or lying. So that's sedentary time over here. So at baseline, participants on average in one day participated in about 1,238 minutes of sedentary time. This includes nighttime sleeping as well. And at 3 months, participants decreased by about 150 minutes and about 90 minutes by the end of the study over the course of time. And this translated to increased standing time and stepping time. So participants who used these workstations decreased their sitting time by about 90 minutes by the end of the study, which translates to about 50 minutes of standing and about 40 minutes of stepping time. And this was significantly different as well. There was no significant change in weight. Participants lost weight on average by about 2.5 kgs by the end of the study. And this weight loss is actually typical in most exercise studies as well. So if you have an exercise study where you recommend somebody to go for a run for about 30 minutes per day for about 5 days per week, that's a typical average weight loss you see in about 6 to 8 months as well. Participants importantly decreased their waist and hip circumference. And when you think about that, when you talk about waist circumference, it's your visceral fat that you're looking at. That's the dangerous fat that's associated with cardiovascular and metabolic disease. Similarly, we had no significant findings in body composition. On average, participants decreased their percent body fat by about 2%, but it wasn't significant. But again, I'd like to point this out here, truncal fat, that decrease in waist circumference by about 5 centimeters translated to about 1.5 kg decrease in truncal fat, which is considered to be beneficial for health. So this is a very busy table here. This has got all our other outcome variables. Just like to point out 3 important variables that's related to health. It's cardiometabolic variables, it's your lipids, and your glucose levels. Participants significantly decreased their total cholesterol by the end of the study and improved their glucose profile by the end of the study. So overarching findings were that we did not give our participants any recommendations to how they should be using this. We didn't tell them, okay, go use this for about 3 hours per day, step for about 1 hour, stand for about 2 hours, nothing like that. We just wanted to see what they would do. And participants did tend to use it, providing an avenue such as a treadmill workstation decreased their total time spent sitting by about 90 minutes per day. And the kind of feedback that we got was that it helps them because they really don't have to be doing strenuous activity while they're working. It's about light intensity activity. So participants felt that they would be more adherent to doing something like this. It's more easy to engage in this as compared to getting a change of shoes, breaking a sweat at the gym for 30 minutes, going to take a shower. So people may be more adherent to something like this. We did see significant improvements in a lot of distal variables. There was decrease in waist and the truncal fat, like I mentioned before. No significant weight loss, but some participants displayed greater weight loss as compared to others. For example, the person who lost the most amount of weight was it was about 26 pounds, I believe, and he walked about 3 to 5 hours per day on average. And the main complaint he had was that his shoes were wearing out. So once we finished this study, the next study we wanted to do was to see if simply replacing sitting with standing as compared to walking using the treadmill workstation helps people. And this has become really popular. You'll see an article about replacing sitting with sit-to-stand workstations maybe every other day in maybe in USA Today or in the New York Times. There's something coming out every day. So we replicated the study we did initially at Northeastern University. This was done in last year, actually, between September 2013 and the summer of 2014. So again, we wanted to examine the same effects on the same outcome variables we looked previously. So we looked at we recruited about 10 overweight individuals for a period of about 8 months, and we wanted to see if reducing sitting time improved their health outcomes. We also wanted to see if changing their behavior at work influenced their behavior while they were outside of work. So would increasing standing time at the workplace, would it influence their standing time or sitting time or physical activity while they were outside the workplace? Again, similar criteria as the previous study. This is a little redundant here, but we want to replicate the same study. We recruited about 10 participants, 18 to 65 years, again overweight and obese participants. One difference was that we cluster recruited these participants. We wanted to get participants in the same office to see if people who are in the people would be influenced by their peers who are using these workstations and see if we could modify behavior accordingly. So the offices, 2 primary offices that we had was ORAF and we had Student Financial Services. Again, we measured physical activity and sedentary behavior using a thigh 1 sensor that we used previously. Same outcome variables again, anthropometrics, body composition, cardiometabolic health, blood work. And one difference was that we used an advanced measurement of hemodynamics. So we wanted to see if increasing standing would influence any arterial markers of health. So how, what is the thickness of the arteries the thickness of the arteries and the velocity at which the blood flows through these arteries, because those are significantly related to cardiovascular health. We were lucky to get a donation of about 10 desks for this from Ergotron. This is the kind of desk that we used. It's a very simple setup. It's got a proprietary mechanism that once you hit a button, it just goes up very rapidly and then can bring it down. So the participant can self-select when they want to stand and when they want to sit pretty quickly. Now for this study, we had some baseline data from our previous study. So we decided to give our participants a recommendation. So we told them that they should accumulate at least 3 hours of standing per day. So we did not stress about how they could accumulate it. They could accumulate it maybe 30 minutes or stand for an hour and get done with it. Another thing we did was we used a sensor which could remind our participants to stand up when they were sitting for too long. So this thigh 1 sensor would buzz once the participants were sitting for about 20 minutes, and when they would receive that cue, it would indicate to them that they need to stand up and use the desk and break their sitting time. This is the participant characteristics. Again, heavy-set participants, about 90 kgs on average. These are findings of behavior change in our participants. These are, on the x-axis, we have the different behaviors. You have sedentary, standing, and physical activity. And on the y-axis is the proportion of time while they are at work spent in these different in these different conditions. So participants significantly decrease the proportion of time being sedentary, and they significantly increase their standing time. One cause of concern from this study was that even the participants were able to increase their standing time and decrease sitting time, they decrease their total physical activity outside the day significantly. So about 2% difference, and this translated to about 20% decrement in steps. So overall, participants are accruing about 4,500 steps per day, and it decreased to about 3,700 steps. So one thing that comes out of this study is that people need to be reminded that they need to be physically active as well. These are the rest of the findings from the study. The first section over here shows weight and anthropometric waist circumference. There were no changes whatsoever as compared to the previous study where we saw significant improvements. Similarly, no difference in blood work, no change at all. There was one finding where we saw at the artery at the knee where there was an increase in the velocity of the blood flow. This actually was a negative finding. This is something we do not want to be seeing. So you can see that there was an increased rate at which the blood flows at the end of the study. So the way to look at this is you want your arteries to be more compliant. So when your heart pumps a bolus of blood, you want the blood flows to the artery. You want the artery to expand so that it flows at a uniform rate. And an increased velocity shows that the artery was not able to expand as much as possible, and so the blood flows faster. And that's related to cardiovascular health outcomes. This is an extension of those same findings. This is your peak systolic velocity. Again, these are our different participants, all 10 participants on the x-axis, and this is the speed at which blood flows on the y-axis. You can see several of these participants demonstrated an increase in the blood flow velocity. And this, I believe, is because there was a decrease in physical activity. It's not just about standing continuously. It's about being able to move more. It's not just replacing sitting with standing is going to be helpful. We don't know that yet. So even though office workers were able to decrease the sedentary time, there were no improvements in a lot of their outcomes. We saw a localized decrease in arterial compliance at the knee. So when you look at it, when I say localized, it's about standing, right? So there's a lot of blood pooling that's going on probably. When you stand, your blood rushes down. There's the force of gravity, there's orthostatic pooling. But we definitely need more evidence on all of these aspects that we're looking at. These were small sample sizes, just 10 participants. However, when you ask our participants, how they feel about using these workstations, they really love it. And this is the kind of feedback we get. We say some people say they're miserable without it. A few months ago, one of my participants sent me an email with this in her subject line: beats my 3 p.m. lethargy. So it helps them to change, get out of that monotony of sitting, and helps them to focus more quite a bit. People feel in charge. They feel that, okay, there are other people who are doing this as well, so they are in charge of their health. Some of the negative feedback that we get is that they tend to forget that you have to do this. I mean, till we, in the study where we didn't have a buzzing monitor, participants would forget that they're sitting right by a treadmill desk. So you need something to remind them, and remind them at the right time to be able to do something. People who stood for real long periods of time, their feet started to ache. This happens to me as well. I use a sit-to-stand desk. Once I start standing, I tend to forget I'm doing it till my feet ache at about 45 minutes or 1 hour. So we need to be able to remind people that they need to break their standing as well. And some people even found the buzzing monitor annoying. If you're sitting right now in a talk and you have a monitor buzzing on the thigh, you can't really stand up and break that sitting time, right? So you need better ways to be able to modify your sedentary behavior. There are several research gaps in this line of work. It's relatively new.
So were they wearing the monitor for 8 months?
In their pockets, yes.
The whole, in the pocket?
Yes.
They were, okay.
Yep.
And then on the slide where how much time difference was there? It was way back, but a slide where you had
Standing?
Yeah.
It was about 2.5, no, hold on. It was about 1 hour, 45 minutes during the day, and about 3 hours, 20 minutes. It was about an hour and a half approximately.
So I'm trying to understand what they did versus what you recommended. So you were recommending accumulate 3 hours of standing, right? What is
Total.
Total?
Yeah.
Total, oh, okay. So did they accumulate that?
At the end of 3 months, they were about 2 hours and 45 minutes, and it reduced by the 9-month period. That tends to happen though.
Okay.
There's a novelty of the intervention, then you see.
And they didn't really have any feedback on how much time they were standing. It was just they got this blessing when they were.
Yes. Yeah.
So, am I correct to understand that in the second study, there was a decrease in physical activity outside the workplace?
Yes.
And I'm just curious, in terms of the time of the year, the seasons in which your study was conducted. I
Right.
know for myself personally, when the weather starts getting
Right.
cold, I tend to walk less. You know, I would like to walk home from work,
Right.
etc. So, was that a factor?
It could be, but the thing is, our measurements were conducted during the fall and the spring, so it's more or less a similar temperature, I would say. It was an 8-month study, so it could have affected seasonality, can affect it, but most studies like this look at samples of measurement over the course of time.
Were there any patterns that emerged related to sex, gender, and age differences?
Too small a sample size to look at.
Uh,
And mostly we had female participants in that study, yes, only about 7 females and about 3 males.
Did you screen for chronic conditions in any of your participants?
Chronic conditions, none had to have any cardiovascular disease that would prevent them from using these workstations.
Thank you.
So there are several things that we still need to know. We don't know the dose responses. We don't know how much is required to actually impact health outcomes. And to me, more than the how much, it's about how you use these workstations. I believe that prolonged is not good for you. Nothing prolonged is good for you. Too much sitting is bad for you. So I'm pretty sure that too much standing is not beneficial as well. It's about accumulating this over the course of time. As I mentioned before, there was change in patterns. Do you have a question, Michelle?
Yeah, you might be getting to it, but I was wondering if you had any theoretical motivation for doing what you did, and how you would respond to sort of the notion that actually people finding that if you just address one particular behavior, that may be very effective for a variety of reasons, because the self-efficacy and kinds of characteristics that determine what behaviors people do and how they eat, right, are actually tied together. And
right.
If you address all of them, or majority, you get different responses. Also, another aspect of the theoretical framework is what Stephen was sort of addressing, which is providing appropriate feedback at appropriate time.
Right.
And I was wondering if you're going to get to that.
Yes. So those are gaps again that I discussed over here. So this was proof of concept that I wanted to show that does actually using this benefit this one variable that we're looking at, cardiometabolic health outcomes and weight and those kind of aspects. Yes. Being able to prompt people at the right time. Still working on it. We've tried quite a bit. Stephen and I are still hoping for some success on some grants that we're writing.
Were you surprised at the results, or were they kind of in line with what you expected?
I was not surprised with either study, but the one finding that surprised me was the decrease in physical activity. I wasn't expecting people to decrease physical activity outside their workplace. All right. So one of the gaps we need to address is how to sustain this behavior over a long period of time. As we saw in those graphs, you can see that people spike up the use of these workstations at about 3 months when it's really novel, and then it decreases. Again, this is similar to any other intervention. Technology could be one of the ways to decrease or be able to sustain these physical activity behaviors. What's the feasibility of these? Can everybody really use this? Not really. It's those office workers who can use it. A lot of employers are starting to use this because they believe that it can help economics. But is there evidence? Not yet. This alludes to the point that I was talking about right now. There is a growing use of this which is occurring at a faster rate as compared to the accumulation of evidence. People are using this quite a bit, but we don't know if it really benefits a lot of these outcomes. This is just food for thought from a physiological perspective. This is change between baseline and the end of the study in the two studies that we looked at. So there are two different kinds of interventions. So here you can see in our sit-to-stand workstations, if it's blue and red, it's a positive change. With regard to sit-to-stand workstations, nothing really positive after 8 months of use, compared to something which, there's more physical activity, more dynamic muscle contractions like treadmill workstations. You can see that there are improvements in several variables. So there's a distinct difference between these kind of workstations that we use. Future studies, we definitely need large-scale studies with a much more robust study design to be able to identify and tease out these differences. We were lucky enough to get some funding from NIOSH for this. We have an ongoing study that's being conducted with Partners Healthcare, with Mass General Hospital actually, and we are looking at the efficacies of treadmill workstations and sit-to-stand workstations. We're comparing the two as well to see what are the differences between these. One of the sites we have is the Prudential Building. We have several offices. We have cluster randomized participants in this. We have about 66 participants in this study. These are just pictures of the workstations we use. This is a prototype of the workstation. There's a treadmill, there's a table, and there's a platform over here to prevent participants from, when they step off the treadmill. It's just a safety feature. That's just a regular treadmill workstation, sit-to-stand workstation that we're using in our study. Other directions that we need to look at is try to examine change in translational subcellular markers. So we know that these are light intensity activities, and it may take some time to affect macro variables such as body composition or those blood biomarkers that are commonly used. So looking at the rate of change in precursor variables that actually affect change in those macro variables may give us a better idea of how much people need to be using this. We can then develop recommendations to see change in these macro variables. Sustainable behavior change. We need to be able to use common technology such as that's available in the office, the computer or the phone. Create a social network within the office to see if we can describe and measure behavior and get an understanding of how people use this. And then once you predict their behavior, be able to condition behavior accordingly so that people can develop habits of using these technologies. Knowing when, where, and why an employee engages in sedentary behavior will be useful in developing new strategies. We need to show the effectiveness. We already show the efficacy of an intervention. We need to show sustainability now. Now, if none of these work, this is one of the solutions I'm proposing 10 years down the line. Powering our devices using these workstations. This is a joke, by the way. You can. Okay, if that doesn't work, this has to work. Being able to get access to the internet unless you use these devices. I mean, these are just ideas that people are actually using out there. It's from a website that I found. I just found it interesting, so I thought I should share it. And these are our collaborators. We have quite a few in Northeastern University who are working on this. Funding source, we had a small pilot study that was funded by the Harvard School of Public Health, and right now we are being funded by NIOSH and CDC to do the large-scale study. Thank you.
So, several questions. First of all, I would like to reiterate the question about your theoretical approach,
Yep.
and we can maybe talk about it. The other thing is that one of the issues that we have with moving while you're working is that when you look at gait, even walking, when you walk, your cognition gets impaired,
Right.
and when you do something cognitive, you have to slow down
Right.
on the walk. So working and doing things besides maybe standing is small, but it's going to impair
Yep.
the performance.
Right.
And
So that's
I
the
wonder how you're going
that's the first question that came to my mind as a doctoral student as well. That's the first study we did. we tested to see if participants changed their performance on different cognitive tasks. This was an acute condition. We had participants sitting and performing math, reading comprehension. We did the Stroop word color task as well to see allocation of attention. And we saw there was a small decrement when they used the workstations. When talking to our participants about this, the strategies that they use is that they use the workstation while they're doing activities that don't require a lot of cognition. So for example, checking email, talking over the phone. If one of our participants who interested in the original study, who wanted to do the study was somebody who did CAD designing, and her boss didn't let her do it because it's not possible. So again, you have to be selective about this.
For some of us, talking on the phone is the most important thing we do.
Yeah, so that's probably a time when you can do it, right? So this person who used this quite a bit, he used to use a headset, and he would, walk and talk.
You can train yourself.
Yes.
To do that, but it takes.
Takes a little. There's a learning curve.
Train, yeah.
Yes.
There's a learning curve that's kind of low slope.
Yep. So I think there's a trade-off too, Misha. I think you should, does it really affect, performance as much, and it helps health as well. So what's, that's what you would look at. Stephen, you're holding your head.
So are you saying that it's because of, there's two things, right? One is if you're doing a task that requires hand coordination. The other is if it's just your mental capacity is partly absorbed in walking. And you're saying it's because you're
It's both,
diverting. But you could argue that the increased blood flow and all that stuff is counteract that, right?
Right,
Essentially.
but the actual activity, depending on how vigorous it is. So if you just
that's another point.
Doing this, right?
Right.
Then your cognition, most people's cognition doesn't get impaired. Even chewing gum is not so bad. But if you are doing something vigorous, you're doing push-ups or something, it's hard for you to respond to conversation.
Well, sure, but if you think about something like walking, given
Walking
that
is,
people evolved walking, talking, it's hard to imagine that walking would be that.
It's hard to imagine. There's an enormous number of studies now since the last 15 years about the effect of the interaction. You would imagine that walking is automatic, right? It's not.
I think the speed of walking too, Misha. The speed at which you walk as well.
And all kinds of other things.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
Treadmill, however, is a little bit complicated because of the push, unless it's a self-paced treadmill.
It is. These are self-paced. So this is the way this thing works. Your walking speed is really slow. It ranges between 1 mile per hour to about 2.5 miles per hour. That's that's the fastest that can be recommended. When you're walking at 2.5 miles per hour, you can easily talk over the phone.
No, you can. It's not that you cannot do it. It's that
How well you do it.
effective, how well, and
Yep.
when you get a complicated thing to solve, when you're not solving problems, and you're talking to
Right.
your whatever friend about last night hockey's game, there's no big effect.
Right.
But if you are trying to figure out how to set up a budget
Right.
for your next grant proposal,
Right.
it's a whole different thing.
Right. But again, that becomes a difference when you're really walking fast. And
Yeah.
the thing with walking too as well, and I use this as well when I started up doing this, you get used to this because there are a few things,
Yes,
you
you
have a
do.
point of reference. If it's a motorized treadmill, you really forget that you're doing it. So again, speed makes a big difference in how intense it
But
is.
what I'm suggesting is that we might want to combine the cognitive metrics in addition to the physical metrics when you're doing these studies.
Oh, yeah,
especially
yeah,
when you start
yeah,
with one.
yeah. So one of the things we are looking at is emotional regulation, emotional status as well, using a simple questionnaire. But we're looking at productivity too. We're looking at, at the MGH study that we're doing, we're looking at, the productivity in processing grant proposals because they do quite a bit. And they have the IRB office, the Research Administration Office, where we are participants. We're looking
You
at
can
that.
measure the number of grants returned without review.
What's that?
You can measure the number of grants returned without review.
Yes, yes.
Because
That's a sad part of our profession.
How would you convince workplaces to adopt these technologies?
Shh.
I know some of the,
Right.
fancy Apple will
Yeah.
do it, but just in a regular workplace.
Right.
How do you sense it?
You have to be able to show the benefits. If you can show that, then people think in terms of economics, health insurance premiums. That's pretty high. They pay quite a bit to for their employees. So if you can reduce that over the course of time, that's a very good way to sell it to current employers.
So I wonder, so you were mentioning at the beginning about the concept of design, prevention through design. So I wonder about, because you are introducing new technology or
Yes.
new elements to the work environment. So what about new layout for the work environment? So you see here some people that have the computer here, the laptop here, and the printer next to. So when you put the printer, I don't know, in the office next to, or that you have to stand up and go,
Right.
this is more natural
Right,
than
right.
just that I have. So we have a
Right.
sit to stand desk. When you have to think about that you have been sitting for 20 minutes, for 30 minutes, but when you have to print out or you have to go to other place, it's more natural.
Right. Yep. There are ideas such as that to do as well, yes. This is a concept, right? The overall goal is to get people to be more active. This is one way to try and do it. We submitted a proposal with Partners Healthcare, where they're coming with a new facility, where they have these different kinds of things where people, with the printers set away, far away, and those kind of things, different ways. A natural environment where physical activity can be promoted. And we tried, we did propose to see if that that is helpful in increasing physical activity. Yes, that's something that we can look at.
So the other thing is about the peers influence.
Yes.
So we have this sit to stand desk, and we noticed that during the summer, for example, we reduce the time that we are stand up. We don't know why, but it's just like, I don't know what happened in the summer, so we are more sitting that. But the other thing that we noticed is that when somebody stand up, so immediately other people stand to do it.
Right.
So it's just like, I wonder about the peers influence. I don't know what is
So
happening.
that's one of the things we're trying to
Yeah, exactly.
harness over here. That's how we do these cluster recruitment, so that people influence each other. Yeah. That's the best way to increase activity. Cooperatively and competitively.
I think it's comfortable, but it's just like.
My question is, how did you recruit the participants? Were they paid during these 9 months, or were they in the same office? They were seeing each other. Were they aware that you are monitoring them?
Yes. So we recruited participants by office for the Sit to Stand study. We approached offices and promoted the study. We said, okay, we are doing this study. Would people be interested in this? So somebody would pitch this during their meetings, and the participants are interested. So we wanted to see if we could get more people in the same office. They did know they were being monitored because they had to wear their sensors. What is the other question?
Did you pay them?
No, we did not pay them. We didn't have enough money for
What
this.
was their initial motivation?
Initial motivation helped. They wanted to get better, actually. That's most of these studies have motivated people to participate.
Were there some participants who dropped in the middle?
Not in the Sit to Stand, but we can see the use definitely increases. In the treadmill workstation that I did, the study that I did, after 3 months there was one participant who dropped out because he didn't see any change in weight. So he just gave up and he just did not participate. But that's part and parcel of doing research, studies like this.
As a way of brainstorming, I was wondering if there's a way to think about it. So when the hunter-gatherer or the farm worker is doing this activity, it's for the purpose of gathering food or
Right.
whatever. It's the positive thing, right? When we put the printer far away, we reduce the efficiency, right? So I'm going to complain because I have to get the response. Anyway, when you walk or have to do other things, so I'm wondering to what extent can we figure out ways to introduce this, because it's so important. I think what you're doing is really critical. But make it improve the performance or something like that would be immediately visible. Because what we're doing, and that's true for other studies as well, with health in general, right? That the return on investment
Right.
comes much later, like when you're 70 or something. Right? And that's too late for the companies that invest. So
Companies are actually investing before we actually
I'm just
can share it and say.
I'm just saying maybe we could brainstorm about ways that we could make those interventions positive.
Right. So
Positively increasing.
with hunter-gatherers, it was about obligatory physical activity.
Yes.
They had to do it,
They
otherwise
had
they
to.
can't put food on their table.
Right.
So now you need to go and get that printout, otherwise you can't see.
Yeah, but
Your
it
report.
delays me responding to your email.
What's that?
It delays me by five minutes to
Right,
responding to
that's
your
true,
email.
yeah. But there's a trade-off, definitely. You need
Yeah,
to be
I
able to
know.
weigh, what,
I'm trying
look at
to-
the overall benefits as compared
I'm
to,
trying to see if there is a way that we could
Yeah.
align those.
we should talk more, Misha.
So to that end, yeah, I guess, one thing is body weight is one thing that people can measure easily. I mean, the cardiometabolic measures don't change that quickly. And so that's a problem, but, you need at least 3 months, maybe more. But if people were on medications and looking at the dose of medication
Mhm.
changes, potentially, the thing is that that's tied up with when people are seen by a physician or whether there is an event of some sort. So none of that really changes that quickly, maybe, really 3 to 6 months. So I think that that's for the health aspect, I think that's difficult because you don't see
Right.
the changes as quickly. And when you look at weight, like that participant you mentioned, if you don't see a change in weight, then you don't,
Yeah.
you don't think that.
So that's why I suggested maybe you should look at translational markers as well. That's, that's
Right.
occurring much before
Yeah.
you see that change
Yes.
in weight.
Yeah, and how you relate that to some function or some aspect. Why do you think they were reducing their physical activity outside of the treadmill, the intervention? And I'm sure you have thought about how would you try to change that?
So why are they doing it?
Yeah.
Two possible reasons. One is probably fatigue from standing too much during the day, and the other could be, okay, this
I already
belief
did
that
my activity.
What's that?
I already did
I already did my activity, I've done this,
Yeah.
so I can compensate.
Yeah.
So that's one reason. But the trade-off is bad in this situation because you're trading off standing for physical activity. So standing, expends much lower energy as compared to the activities which burns more calories. So that's what people need to be more cognitive about this. We need to find out ways to actually make people, or provide reminders like you need to be more active. So this is not just in this case to stand workstations. It can be regular people. So maybe technology that can reach more people at the right time would be useful.
And that made me think about Misha's comment that, in this goal setting and motivation piece that probably needs to be more enhanced, thinking that the activity during work is complementary of what you do outside of work so that you really do get at those benefits, that those response that happens sooner than 3 to 6 to 1 year time. Yeah, because the dose response is people have hard time waiting for.
Yep.
Yeah.
So is it a bigger problem, or not, sort of lack of scientific understanding about the physiological aspects of this, or sort of the behavioral aspects of this? So if you put somebody in a bubble and you measure sitting and standing, right, over some period of time, do you feel like the benefits can be quantified so that you could convey it to somebody? Or is that still too much? Is there still a lot of unknown there? You don't really know what the benefits of the sitting and the standing are. And then, because the other issue is the compensation and the factors of people not seeing the benefits and they're compensating and all that. And that also requires study, right? Because if you're standing at your desk and later, I mean, I know for my desk, if I stand, I definitely feel it later, which would make you think you probably compensate to a certain extent. So which of those two is the bigger problem? Because it seems to me from the community of people, certainly the sit to stand people, there doesn't seem to be an agreement about how good it really is for you. Like some people are saying this is the new smoking, and then other people, I think you're more on the skeptical side of not so sure. Which is the bigger problem?
So we definitely need to show that there are benefits to this, the physiological aspect, right? And you need to incorporate more behavioral change theories to be able to actually sustain these behaviors once we show that there are benefits. So I think this has to be done simultaneously. It's not just about do just one aspect and then follow up with the other one as well. Because if you're not able to promote the behavior as much, we may not be able to see the physiological outcomes as well. So, I mean, if people are not using this as much as they really should be using it, we won't see any benefits.
Well, no, but that's what I'm saying, if you put them in a lab, right, and I said, okay, I'm going into my research lab for the next 8 months, and I'm gonna watch everything you do and know everything, you know, then if you say, no other changes, stand for 3 extra hours a day, does the community feel like it knows what the benefit of that is yet, or not?
No, we're still trying to figure that out.
Okay.
But I think the exercise community, exercise science community would say standing, breaking the sitting is beneficial, regardless of what the evidence is. Because you're becoming more, you're being less sedentary.
Right,
Well,
so
it
it's
seems
breaking
like-
the sitting with what, though? Right, it's about, is it just standing or is it about the movement? We definitely know that the movement helps.
Yes.
Because you're accumulating physical activity, there's more caloric expenditure. It's what you're breaking it with. The standing doesn't burn as many calories. Even if you measure it, it doesn't. But it's got, you know, if sitting by itself is harmful, which a lot of epidemiological evidence says, then maybe standing is better than just sitting. But we don't know, you know, how long does it take to translate to measurable health outcomes.
Well, the reason everybody always wants to talk about it is because it seems like it's the low-hanging fruit. Right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
then the next most low-hanging fruit is walking, which Misha
Right.
is saying is
Yes.
impairing your cognitive performance. Right?
Yeah.
So there.
Walking fast.
Walking fast.
Yeah.
Also very huge individual differences. I have one friend, brilliant woman, who cannot talk and walk at the same time. She stops, even though if we are late into appointment,
Right.
she stops.
I mean, again, there is individual variability for a lot of interventions, both physiological, behaviorally, in all aspects. So, you know, one size doesn't fit all.
No. And you can train. You know, it's not that you cannot train that out. So if you get really automatic and the expectations are fit to whatever is going on, then cognition environment is minimal.
Well, it's worth thinking about it because if you,
I
if you
agree.
can't convince people that it's, if you don't know for certain that it's actually good for you, it's hard to then say, oh, we'll design a bunch of interventions to get you to do it. And I'm not, I mean, on one hand, I'm curious about these experiments because it's absolutely the case that if you're tired and then you raise your sit-to-stand desk, you're more alert. I mean, you can't be as tired standing as you can be sitting. And so one of the arguments I think people make for these sorts of things is that it might actually improve your productivity and not impact your productivity.
There are some studies that have looked at that as well. There's one study that looked at collaboration when they use sit-to-stand workstations in an office. And they had some measure, I don't remember what it was, but the conclusion was that there is more collaboration in people. You need sensitive measures, that's the
Yes.
main thing,
Yeah.
you know, for everything.
In short time.
So maybe it's time to start.